If you've been looking for a new or certified Toyota, come be part of the team. With inventory arriving daily, we'll help you find a vehicle that works for your lifestyle and budget. We'll continue to ensure that your next buying experience is as safe and efficient as possible. Our service center is open with easy online scheduling and a quick, clean process to get you back on the road safely. Head to teamtoyota.net and be safe, be strong, be a team. Hey everybody, welcome to the Phillies Talk Podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman and he's Jim Salisbury. MLB free agency is underway, and this week the general managers meetings are taking place out in California where Jim is right now. Dave Dombrowski speaking earlier this week, and he kind of tipped his hand about the Phillies' top priorities this offseason, huh?
He sure did. If you remember, after the season, he held his kind of post-mortem year-ender over there at Citizens Bank Park. And it was, he articulated what he thought the team's biggest needs were. And in no particular order, he mentioned center field, left field, leadoff man, big bat in the middle of the order, upgraded shortstop, closer. 5 weeks later, the general managers meetings begin. The postseason is over. World Series champion has been crowned. Free agency begins, general managers meetings begin, off-season begins to ramp up, still very, very early stages, groundwork stages. But yeah, he chatted with a bunch of Philadelphia scribes yesterday on day one of the meetings, Tuesday. And I actually, asked him, framed it around, back in October, you mentioned all your big needs and all the areas you want to fill. What's your personal preference? What stands atop your list? And he said, well, we need a left fielder. We need a center fielder. Those are absolute necessities. We don't have a left fielder. We don't have a center fielder. He said, we don't have a closer. We need a closer. So he said, he listed those three areas. And then he kind of paused and said, but, if I had to pick one thing that would stand out for him, it would be closer. He says he wants somebody who can come in and close games, no doubt about it. And I can't say I blame him after seeing, a lot of the carnage in the ninth inning and throughout the bullpen the last couple of years, even beyond that in Philadelphia. But I mean, the shortened season of 2020 was historically bad in the bullpen. And you could even say 2021 was historically bad because they blew 34 saves in that bullpen, which was tied a major league record, which was a club record. So at this time of year, you kind of got to read the tea leaves a little bit, but for him to come out and say closer stands atop his list, and I don't know, he might address something else before that because he does have a lot of needs. And like you said, he absolutely needs a left fielder, hopefully, or preferably one with a big bat. He needs a center fielder, needs a leadoff man, but knowing his MO and his history, he likes to have lockdown closers. He's had them in the past. He's sought them in the past. So it sounds like he's really prioritizing closer. Bunch of them out there. Big names, medium names. Raisel Iglesias from Anaheim, one of your longtime favorites, is out there. The problem is he has that qualifying offer, and Dombrowski said that not necessarily a deal breaker, but he prefers not to surrender draft picks. So that's going to impact what he can do in the outfield because a bunch of those outfielders have received qualifying offers. But, Kendall Graverman, Kenley Jansen, Mark Melanson, who's had this long career and just continues to rack up saves, led the majors, at least the NL, in saves last year in 2021. So those guys are free agents. Oakland is going to peddle everything. So they'll have pieces out of that bullpen. And, of course, a couple of trade candidates are Josh Hader and Craig Kimbrell, and Hader's, lights out, and Kimbrell, but he's going to be expensive, which you have to give up. And Kimbrell is, signed for another year at $16 million with the White Sox, and they intend to trade him. Phillies had interest in Kimbrell at the deadline. Dombrowski traded for Kimbrell when he was previously in Boston. So I think all those names are names to watch, but clearly this guy wants to get a closer, and I don't blame him.
Well, I mean, when you think about like the phrase elite closer, right? I wouldn't necessarily apply that to Mark Melancon, despite the fact that he's had a lot of seasons with 30 plus saves. If you bring a guy like that in, or if you bring a guy like Kendall Graveman in, they're closer to the Ian Kennedy mold than they are to the like elite closer mold, in the sense that, they're not, that it's not big velocity. It's not a lot of missed bats. There's room for bad luck, for example, more room for bad luck than you'd have with a Josh Hader or a Craig Kimbrell. So, I mean, when I think about those things, even with the qualifying offer being attached to Raisel Iglesias, if the need is closer and the idea is to get rid of like the shakiness of the ninth inning, don't you have to go after a top guy like an Iglesias or a Kimbrell or a Hader? Kenley Jansen, I guess, could fit that description, but he's kind of shaky. It seems like every season Kenley Jansen goes through like a 6-week period where people are saying, ooh, should he still be the closer? And then he figures things out. And he's obviously, a borderline Hall of Famer.
Hey, look, I'm just kind of rattling off the names. And he mentioned, he didn't use the word elite, but, he implied it could be that one guy. He said it could be a couple of guys, but we need to figure out a way to lock down that ninth inning. I mean, it's the middle of November. They have, a lot of off season to figure this out. There's a lot of ways they can go. But his past history with Kimbrell and the fact that, I really think they were in on Kimbrell this summer, and I think the price was just prohibitive, what they could give up and what the Cubs wanted. I think they'll definitely investigate. They're going to investigate all avenues. You always want to come up with the best player you can, but they have they're going to have limits of what they can do for the simple reason they have so many holes. They have so many holes: left field, center field, leadoff. And they need to flesh out that bullpen. He mentioned the need for not just one arm late in the game, but for two arms. And I agree with him. I think they probably need 3 or 4 arms down there. The good teams have great bullpens, and they got to do something about this bullpen. But they have it's not like he's going into this offseason with this killer team that is one piece away, closer, from winning it all. And you can really focus on the guy that's going to, deliver you a parade. They're going to have to investigate every avenue and come up with the guy who makes the most sense in terms of what you have to give up possibly in the trade, in terms of what he costs in terms of payroll budget. So I don't know which way they're going to go, but they're going to end up with somebody who can close games. That much is pretty clear.
Okay, and then moving on to the outfield. So a couple free agents who would fit the Phillies that were extended qualifying offers by their former teams: Michael Conforto, Nick Castellanos, who we've talked about a ton here. When Dave Dombrowski says that he would prefer not to give up the draft pick that's attached to the qualifying offer, do you think that means the Phillies are just straight up not going to do that, or that it's kind of a tiebreaker of sorts, that if they have 2 outfielders or two players at any position graded similarly, that the tiebreaker might go to the player who's not attached to draft pick compensation? And just a quick refresher, the way it works is that if you're a team in the Phillies position and you were to sign a player who was given that qualifying offer and rejected it, the Phillies would forfeit their second highest draft pick, so their second round pick, and they would forfeit $500,000 of international bonus pool money. So where do you think the Phillies really ultimately stand on that?
He didn't completely rule out signing a player who has draft pick compensation attached to him. Did not rule it out, but did make it clear that he prefers not to go that way. They want to, keep their draft picks, keep their high draft picks. And you got Brian Barber, who's your scouting director now. He's had 2 pretty good drafts to start off. You want to give him all the resources you can give. But he didn't rule it out. So, if the number is right and the guy is right, maybe they will surrender that draft pick. But all I can tell you is at this moment, he prefers not to. And yeah, with Castellanos, with Conforto, I think Conforto would be a guy who would make a lot of sense. Left-handed bat. But, we'll see. We'll see. The draft pick compensation is not a deal breaker, but it's going to give them reservations. He made that very clear. And there's a bunch of guys at shortstop who have the qualifying offer attached to them. I'm not sure it's going to be as much of a factor there at shortstop for the Phillies because, at this time of year, you have to kind of read the tea leaves and judge the body language and parse the words. And it just doesn't sound like they're going to dive into that shortstop market. It's a really good one with, obviously Correa, Seager, Simeon, Trevor Story. I think he'd kill Citizens Bank Park. But all those guys have the offer. And, you listen to Dombrowski, they have so many holes. And you take the fact that they have so many holes to fill, so many needs, and then you juxtapose that against listening to Dombrowski really rave about Bryson Stott. I came away with the impression that, and you never say never, and but I came away with the impression that probably not going to sink a bunch of money into shortstop in this free agent market, because I think they feel like Stott could be the guy. They need improvement out of Didi if he's the guy, and they'll need a stopgap if Didi's not the guy and Stott's not ready. But he gushed about Stott on Tuesday out here. He really gushed about the way he's maturing and playing. And, he's a former first-round draft pick. They need to click on one of these first-round draft picks. They need an impact guy. And he's having a great run out there in the Arizona Fall League. And Dombrowski said he pulled him aside in the Arizona Fall League and said, I want you to come to camp thinking you can win this job, thinking you can make this team. That needs to be your mindset. Don't come to camp, a young guy happy to be here, eyes wide open, go out trying to win a job. So, and he flat out said he's not averse, that was his word, to jumping a guy from AA to the majors. Says he's done it in the past and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Said nothing's going to be handed to the guy, that he's got to go out and win it, but he's going to get that opportunity. Now, this could be, sports psychology 101, putting the heat a little bit on Didi's, was off-season workouts, so strong, and comes in ready to go. He mentioned Gregorius had a clean up on his elbow, so that should help. But the impression I came away with was they really like Stott as a shortstop either sometime next year or beyond. And I don't know that the plan is to tie up a long-term deal and a lot of money at a shortstop when you feel like you got one coming. So they might solve it in another way in 2022. Maybe it's an improved Didi. Maybe it's a push on Stott. We'll see, but it just sounds like, and there's a lot of guesswork at this time of year, but it just sounds like they're going to kind of spread their resources, payroll wise, maybe trade resource wise, in other areas, left field, center field, and throughout that bullpen. And then they need starting pitching depth as well. You always need more starting pitching depth. You can never have enough, right? So that was the impression that I came away with, that they like Stott enough not to be super aggressive in this shortstop market. I'm sure they're going to dip their toe in there and do their due diligence, talk to every one of these agents. You never know. You might have a guy say, I really want to come to Philly and blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of the vibe I got at the shortstop position.
Well, you can only have so many $100 million plus contracts on the same payroll. And those shortstops are going to get $150 million plus, talking about Carlos Correa and Corey Seager and Trevor Story. And while any of them would be incredible to put at shortstop and put into the middle of the Phillies lineup, how bad would it look if a couple years after spending such a high pick on Stott, that the Phillies would go out and sign one of those shortstops? So, yeah, I mean, it would seem to make more sense to spread it around and spend that money at positions that are of greater need. You referenced the starting pitching market there, and you wrote a piece earlier this week at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, just kind of exploring the idea of an Aaron Nola trade. Like, would the Phillies consider moving him this offseason after the disappointing 2021 year that he had? A lot of the reaction to that I saw was people saying, why would the Phillies sell low on Aaron Nola? Kind of take us through where you think they stand on that and if it's an actual possibility.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's a possibility. I mean, in the piece, I was pretty clear. I basically wondered aloud whether they would shop Aaron Nola. Baseball wise, I think it makes sense to listen on all your players. You never know what might come back. And Dombrowski indeed said, with they don't have a ton of minor league prospects. The ones they have, they want to be protective of. He, said it's possible that they would move somebody from their core, the 26-man core, if it represents the right upgrade. But if your ears are open on Aaron Nola, I don't know that you're necessarily selling low. I mean, you're selling low on some of the traditional stats. You're selling low on his overall season last year, which we all know was a disappointment. Even he called it a disappointment. But I mean, in this era of advanced metrics, I think there's still a lot to like about Aaron Nola as a pitcher and his season in 2020. Still a strikeout guy. He's durable. He doesn't miss starts. He takes the ball. Maybe it was just a bad year. Maybe he comes back and next year is a is the stud that that's in there, along with Wheeler and Eflin and Gibson and Suarez. But maybe it's the right time to listen. So just suppose this, and you always have to listen, because that's it's your responsibility. You never know what might come down the pike to improve your ball club. And yes, you're creating a hole in your starting rotation if you did that. And I'm not advocating trading Aaron Nola. I mean, I'm one of his biggest fans. I think he's a warrior. He's a Philly through and through. And I'm not advocating running him out of town because he had a difficult year. I'm just wondering if Dave Dombrowski, veteran baseball man, would entertain the idea of moving him, maybe for a couple of prospects that are good and major league ready or close to major league ready. That could help you. And the accompanying issue there, or accompanying subject is, he's owed about $20 million. He's entering the last guaranteed year of his deal, and with salary and buyout, he's owed about $20 million. I'm not saying you take that $20 million and put it in your pocket. Reallocate it around the diamond and help fill other needs. Get a couple prospects, put about $18 million in your pocket and spread it around, and maybe get a starter and a bullpen piece. Maybe it inches your team forward as he approaches the final year of his contract. Again, I'm not advocating it, but I think it makes sense to at least explore. And a lot of people agree with me, because I've been asked by people from other clubs, hey, are they going to shop Aaron Nola this winter? They're going to listen on Aaron Nola. So obviously it's this topic that's been out there, and I just think it's a little subplot to keep an eye on this winter. When push comes to shove, I totally expect to see Aaron Nola in Clearwater and holding down a spot in the rotation in April, but you never know. You just never know. And Dave Dombrowski has been charged with improving this team, which has missed the playoffs 10 years in a row. And sometimes that means being very creative.
Aaron Nola's contract situation is interesting for a couple of reasons in this whole conversation. One is, he's owed $15 million in the 2022 season, which is a great price for a pitcher that you can, ideally put at the number 2 spot in your rotation. Even in a good year, he's looked like an ace. So there's that. The fact that if you're like a mid-market team, that $15 million price tag, that's not as cumbersome as some of these other numbers that you're going to be playing with for pitchers at the top of the market. So that's one. Two is, you said it's the final guaranteed year of his contract. The Phillies have the club option in 2023. So from that aspect, there's more trade value when the guy has more control. You would think that there would be more trade value with Aaron Nola even coming off of a down season at this point than there would be if he only had one season of control. So there's those two factors. And, it's been obvious to anybody who's watched the Phillies the last few years that while they have a lot of high-end talent, a lot of really good individual pieces, they have not yet found like the right team formula. So it could, it's an interesting idea. It could allow them to kind of allocate their resources in other ways if they go that route. And the fact that they do have Ranger Suarez as a budding young starting pitcher, I would think has to factor into this as well. The fact that they feel good about a young guy, not just that they have, a veteran in Kyle Gibson returning, but also a young guy in Ranger Suarez. Did Zack Eflin's name come up at all with Dombrowski this week? And do you think there's any update there in terms of when the Phillies might be expecting him in the 2022 season?
There's still no timetable. He's progressing well. He's got some tests coming up, but it's still going to be a lengthy process in that 6 to 8 month window on that knee surgery. They're not expecting him to start the season on time. They'll have a better timetable as the winter progresses, but they do expect him back healthy, but not out of the gate. I think you and I have talked a bit about this, watching major league teams operate for a long time. And the fact that Zack is going into his walk year, he's going to want to really, be ready. His future is in the balance here. I believe it'll be sometime in May, maybe closer to the end of May, like Memorial Day, just to make sure he's got his legs, just to make sure he's ready. And that's fine. That gives you 4 months. You get 4 months of a healthy Zack Eflin, but they're going to need pitching depth. Even if they listen on Nola, and even if Nola never goes anywhere, and I think there's a likelihood he's right back here, you're still going to need more pitching depth. So you can never, ever have enough of it. But I think it always behooves you to listen. Your players are coveted, and they can bring back some value. and that value can inch things along, push things along, it is your obligation to listen.
Jim, late last week, the Phillies cut ties with a handful of players. The biggest name I would say that stood out was Andrew Knapp, the backup catcher who's been here the last 5 years. Now, we talked recently about how the Phillies feel good about a couple of the young catchers they have in their system, Rafael Marchand, Logan O'Hoppe, who seems to be crushing it out in the Arizona Fall League. And we talked about, do the Phillies want to give those guys everyday playing time in AA and AAA, or make one of them the backup catcher? Where do you think that stands right now? Are they looking for a veteran to back up JT Realmuto, or might we see one of those young guys?
They're looking for a backup. Dombrowski was pretty clear in saying he'd like to upgrade from Andrew Knapp, especially on the offensive side. They're going to have to play that backup side. And he also said he thinks there's going to be a DH next year. JT can get some time at DH, get him off his feet a little bit. But they got to protect him to kind of maximize the 4 remaining years of his deal. You got to get him off his feet, give him a rest now and then. So that really necessitates the need for or illustrates the need for a backup catcher who can really help you, behind the plate and at the plate. So they're looking. He would like to upgrade from Knapp. He basically he flat out said that. I mentioned this a few weeks ago that, to me, you let Marchand play every day at AAA, and you let O'Hoppe play every day at AA. Both of them are an hour away. If you need them for a week or two, they're an hour away. They can come down 476 and come down 422 and be at the ballpark in an hour. So you play them every day, get a backup. I don't think it's in their plans to have those guys start in the majors as a backup. It wouldn't behoove their development. And Dombrowski essentially confirmed that, yesterday that they prefer to have those guys play.
All right, Jim, and let's finish with this. Bryce Harper won the Hank Aaron Award last night. We sit here to record this on Wednesday morning. Harper won the Players' Choice Award for Outstanding Offensive Player in the National League. He won the Hank Aaron Award for the second time in his career. It would seem that the momentum is surging toward Bryce Harper winning the MVP. Do you think that's going to happen at this point?
Well, I think it was Bob Dylan who said that you don't have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing, right? My good buddy Sixto will correct me on that if I'm wrong, I'm sure. But it seems that way, right? I don't know, but it's next Thursday night, and everything seems to be pointing that way. I think he's deserving of it. He was a one-man show in the second half, kept his team right in contention to the end, and has dazzling numbers. So we'll see. I think I told you this before. There's about 11 or 12 guys in the National League that you could make a case for to win the MVP, about 11 or 12. Pretty amazing and a pretty difficult ballot. But Harper prevailing in the Players' Choice and the Hank Aaron Award, which is a great award. He's certainly a favorite for the MVP, and we'll see what happens next week.
And then there's the Cy Young where, I know I've been saying this for months, but if workload matters, I don't know how you don't give it to Zack Wheeler, because he had 35 more innings than Max Scherzer. He had like 60 more innings than Corbin Burns. And those are the 3 finalists. The only guy who was kind of in that mix who could have matched Wheeler's workload was Walker Buehler, but he's not a finalist. So maybe that kind of changes that conversation a little bit. But I guess if you had to peg it now, would you say Harper has a better chance at MVP than Wheeler has at Cy Young, or is it close?
Yeah, I'd probably say Harper, just because of all this momentum we're seeing. And granted, the momentum really doesn't matter because the voting is done.
Right.
By a different group of people, baseball writers, and it's done day after the season. So it's all based on regular season. So it's not like, all this momentum is going to force somebody to cast a vote today for Bryce Harper. No, the votes have been in for weeks, but it just seems like he's got, he had the type of season and he kept his team around, which I think is important. It's about keeping your team in it and winning. I don't think you necessarily have to go to the postseason, but I also don't think you can wallow, in the second division or have a second half collapse and get your team and win the MVP. I think team performance and doing it in pressure situations matters. So I think there's a lot of support for Harper, but we'll see. I would probably say, if I had to give you a guess, I would say Harper probably has a better chance of winning his award than Wheeler, but you make such a good point about that workload. And when you divide up those extra innings and put them in the Frank, define them as starts. Like he made 4 more starts than this guy, 6 more starts than this guy. Man, that's real value. So I think this, obviously both guys are finalists in the top 3, and that's something to be, pretty special right there to be in the top 3. I mean, this, like, how many big league players are there? 800 plus or whatever, and to be considered in the top 3 of your league is a hell of an accomplishment. So, but they certainly could come away with both. I don't know. We're going to see. I'm fascinated to see what happens. Wednesday night will be the Cy Young. Thursday night will be the MVP. If they have both, there's going to be an element of pain to it that they didn't even make the postseason. They had the best pitcher, the best player in the National League. But they got to break this postseason drought. If they have both award winners, it just tells you how top heavy that roster is, and it tells you the importance of having a full 26-man roster, and even beyond that, because you actually use 35 players, guys coming in and out, and then the deals you might make during the season. So they still have a lot of improvement to do in the bulk of this roster. But the being finalists with Wheeler and Harper tells you they got some real talent at the top, and they can't waste any more of these guys' prime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the best fact about Wheeler's workload in 2021 is the fact that he was part of more plate appearances than any hitter was. Like, he faced more hitters than any hitter had total plate appearances in a season. So, I mean, he had just it was a different year for him than it was for these other Cy Young finalists. Who knows what would have happened if Scherzer pitched 50 extra innings? Like, would he have pitched to a 3.5 ERA and then his numbers look worse? There's a lot that can happen in that extra sample size.
No question. And there's so much value to me in innings, and we're kind of losing that with the way starting pitchers are used. I mean, there was always value in innings, and a starting pitcher that takes the ball and grinds it out every 5th day. I just have so much respect for that kind of guy. So, we'll see what happens Wednesday night with Zack Wheeler. I think he's got a great chance. And before we logged off, I know you're a big NBA fan, and I wanted to tell you what I did last night.
What's that?
So after I finished writing, I went out and grabbed an In-N-Out burger.
Nice.
Took it back to the room, but I watched on YouTube the 4th quarter of the 1969 NBA Finals between the Lakers and the Celtics. Russell against Chamberlain, Jerry West, John Havlicek. And the reason I did that, and I'm not the biggest NBA fan in the world, but I just read this book by Lee Montville. It was a great writer for the Boston Globe when I was growing up, one of my all-time favorites. Read like all his books, but I just read his book about the 1969 NBA Finals, and it's called I got it right here. It's called Tall Men, Short Shorts. Really good. Nice. And it's sort of a memoir of his career, and he was a young writer covering these finals. All these great players, Wilt against Russell, and it was just fascinating to read about this final series, 1969 final series in the NBA between those two, Lakers and Celtics. And, his descriptions of the, and I was too young to obviously remember this, but his descriptions of the 4th quarter was so fascinating that I actually found it on YouTube and I watched the 4th quarter. It was great how quick the game moved, the pace of the game. There wasn't a lot of, fanfare and timeouts. It was just, basketball, right? And Celtics hang on. Don Nelson hits this crazy shot, which he described in the book, and there it is. So there's this crazy shot, boom. And the Celtics win the championship, which, they had won a whole bunch of them in a row. They run off the floor. No champagne. They run off the floor, shake each other's hands in the clubhouse, and that's it. One post-game interview, and they send it out. But so I wanted to recommend that book to you because I know you love the NBA, and it's really great writing. And there's a lot of stuff in there about the newspaper business and the sports media business, how he weaves it all in there. And there's an awesome anecdote about an old friend of mine, and I believe this guy was a friend of yours as well, Stan Hockman, who we always would see around the office at NBC Sports Philadelphia, Comcast Sportsnet. We'd always see him around the office back in the days of Daily News Live. And that was really a thrill of mine to get to know Stan and talk about the 64 Phillies, things like that. But there's a great anecdote in this book about Stan Hochman. I'm not going to give it away. And but I just wanted to tell you how I spent my night last night, watching YouTube, the fourth quarter, Game 7, 1969 NBA Finals, and it was really, really cool. Almost as good as the In-N-Out Burger.
Well, yeah, Stan was a joy to be around. And that's kind of funny. You and I are on the same wavelength because I've never thought about the 1969 NBA Finals, but last night after the Sixers game, I happened upon on YouTube. It was the 1986 NBA season preview on CBS heading into the year. And the big storyline that they were talking about was the Celtics are looking to become the first team since the 1969-70 Celtics to repeat as NBA champions. So what are the odds that we were both watching something about that on the same night? But
wow. So you got to pick up this book. It's just such a great read.
All right. So you and I might have to join the Sixers Talk podcast next week. But other than that, thanks for listening. Big doings around here. There's awards season. There's the hot stove season cracking off. So keep it tuned to NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com and the Phillies Talk Podcast.